Hi again. So we're talking today about getting a job teaching English in China. This is going to be a little longer video talking about the basic requirements on how to get a work visa. And yes, you will need to get a work visa. Now, I'm going to go more in depth with all of these later in the video, but real quick, here's what you need to get a work visa in China. The first thing, you must have a US passport with at least 2 years validity. Number two, you must commit at least 1 year. Number three, you must have a college degree. If you're still in school, that's okay. You just need to have one by the time you apply for your visa. Number four, you must have a clean criminal record. You must be under 55 years old. You must be healthy, and we'll go more in depth on that later. And number seven, you must have a 120-hour TEFL certificate. Okay, so this is a lot of stuff right now. We're going to go more in depth. But if you don't meet these requirements, or if you will not in the near future, there's kind of no real path for you to do this legally in China. And of course, we do recommend doing all of this legally. Okay, so now let's go more in depth. The first thing you need to be is that you need to be a U.S. citizen and have a passport with at least 2 years validity. So, if today is March 1st, 2020, your passport should not expire any earlier than March 1st, 2022. Actually, the further away your expiration date, the better. The reason you'll need 2 years validity is for requirement number 2. A 1 year commitment. Actually, this isn't really a requirement, but most schools will want you to commit to working with them for at least 1 year. This is because when the Chinese government issues a work visa, it's good for 1 year. You can actually leave earlier than this, but the thinking is, since the school has gone through the trouble of doing the paperwork for you to get the visa, they want to maximize on the time limit, and they want you to stay at least a year. And keep in mind, you will also need to get an apartment there, or some kind of housing. More on that in a separate video, but for now, when you get an apartment, you will probably be locked into a 1 year lease. So when you decide to do this, move to China, teach and all of that, you have to keep in mind it will probably be for 1 year. Now, because it's a year, your passport should be able to cover the period of time between when you start work and when you return home. Also, if you choose to visit another country on your way back home, they might deny you entry because many countries do require at least 6 months validity remaining in your passport for you to be granted entry. Okay, so that's the passport requirement. Okay, so requirement number 3, you will need to have at least a bachelor's degree. It can be in any subject. You don't need to have studied English or early childhood development or anything like that. It can be in any subject, but you will need to have the actual paper degree that the school gave you. Okay, requirement number 4, a clean criminal record. China is quite specific about this requirement. For Americans, you will need to get your fingerprints scanned and get a background check through the FBI. You don't actually need to go to the FBI. Instead, your local community will have a licensed company offering the service, and they will mail you the results. You can Google search where to get this done, or if you like, we can find one near you. Now, there is a cost for this service, but most schools will reimburse you, so keep the receipt and bring it with you to China. Okay, requirement number 5, you must not be older than 55 years old. This is because the retirement age in China is currently set at 60 years old, and visas usually aren't given out to those that are older. Okay, next requirement number 6, you must be healthy. People who have things like Hansen's disease, that's leprosy, HIV, AIDS, STDs, tuberculosis, or any other such infectious diseases are not permitted to work in China. In fact, you, along with everyone else in China, will be required to take a medical exam in China, which includes a blood test, a urine test, and a chest x-ray. Now, if you refuse to take a medical exam, you will likely be disqualified for the job. Now, for those of you guys who are worried about this thing, as far as our understanding of it, they only test for disease, okay? They don't test for anything else. So if you have some concerns outside of your health, they only test for, diseases. That said, if you're healthy, if you're sure you're healthy, go ahead and move forward with the process. Again, there is a cost to take this exam in China, but your company will reimburse you, so keep the receipt. However, if you're a little unsure about how healthy you are, it might be that you get disqualified on medical grounds. So before you do anything else, it's probably a good idea to go in for a physical. The cost of this, however, probably won't be reimbursed because it's considered an additional medical exam. So if you're sure you're healthy, move forward. If you're really unsure, then go in for a physical before you move forward, okay? Okay, guys, so next requirement number 7, a 120-hour TEFL or tesol certificate. If you know you're healthy and you meet all the other requirements, this next thing is what you should be getting started with immediately. Basically, it's a course that teaches you how to create lessons for English learners. You'll learn to look at English in ways that maybe you never thought about. You'll also review a lot of grammar, which of course you know how to use already, but it will teach you to look at it through the eyes of a learner. We have that other video, Am I Qualified, which will give you a bit of a primer on what we're talking about. Anyway, TEFL stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language, and TESOL stands for Teaching English as a Second Language. Now, if you're wondering, there's really no difference between the two. Both are acceptable to teach in China, and actually you can take the course and get the certificate before finishing your bachelor's degree. So get started with it as soon as possible. Well, okay, so you might be thinking, a certificate, that sounds difficult and expensive. It totally isn't. The course itself is actually quite easy, and you can get it done online in as fast as a month. And yes, online courses are perfectly acceptable. The cost can vary. They can be as cheap as $150 all the way up to over $1,000. Now, compared to what you've paid for your bachelor's, this is super cheap. Now, of course, the more expensive programs will sometimes outright say that the cheaper ones aren't reputable. This is all nonsense. We've known plenty of teachers in China with exactly this type of cheaper certificate, and they've had zero problems. And certainly for you, dear viewer, we're assuming that you're just now starting out in this. Should you decide to make a career out of teaching English overseas, yes, go ahead and invest in a more robust training course. Some countries actually require a more robust course. China does not. So for now, since you're very new to this, there's really no need to spend so much. And again, feel free to research the courses yourself, but what you'll find very quickly is a lot of conflicting information, so it can be very easy to feel overwhelmed. For our part, there are some courses that we recommend. We'll put a link in the description below. But again, at this point, there's really no need to spend a crazy amount. Now, if you've done any research on the actual jobs, you might have seen that some schools will even pay the cost of your certificate, or they will reimburse it. This is especially true for private sector language schools for young kids. That's like preschool, kindergarten kids. Here, the demand is so huge that these schools are willing to do what it takes to get you over there. Some of them will even pay for your flights and all of the fees associated with getting your work visa. Now, if you like the idea of working with kids, this is totally a great deal, especially since that TEFL, after you finish that first year, you can take it with you and work someplace else, and basically use it your whole life should you choose. With this TEFL certificate, keep in mind, similar to your college degree, you will need the actual paper certificate from whichever place you take your course. They will probably email you an electronic copy as well as sending it to you in the mail. But if they're sending it from another country, it might take a while, so it might be worth it to pay extra for expedited shipping. Again, to review, you must have a US passport with at least 2 years validity. Number two, you should look to be committing at least 1 year to be doing this. Number three, you must have a bachelor's degree by the time you apply for your visa. Number four, you must have a clean criminal record. Number five, you must be under 55 years old. Number six, you must be healthy with no infectious disease. And number seven, you must have a 120-hour TEFL or a tesol certificate. Okay, guys, there are your requirements to get your work visa in China. That's going to do it for me today. Get started on that TEFL ASAP if you haven't already. We're going to have a lot more videos with a lot more with a lot more info coming, so stay tuned. And we will see you next time.